Let's begin with a short meditation together. Just allow your eyes to close. Don't worry too much about the posture you're in. What's most important is that you're straight but not rigid, and that your breath can flow freely. And allow yourself to very specifically draw the awareness that usually we keep focused in that world around us, what we're seeing, what we're hearing. We take all of that sharp awareness and really visualize pulling it inwards. Those of you old enough to remember TV sets that used to have antenna on the top can picture antenna as though they were around your body, picking up all of the sensations in the world outside of you. And then you take those antennae and you turn them inward. And if you're not old enough to remember when TV sets had antenna, just visualize yourself energetically pulling the awareness that usually goes out into the world. Just pull that toward the inner world. And allow that awareness to merge into your breath. So we're not doing pranayama, we're not trying to change the breath, but just allow the awareness to become fully merged into the breath as it flows in and flows out. Whenever you notice that the mind gets distracted, whether by a sound or a sensation from the outer world, or whether by a thought from the inner world, just draw it back. Don't yell at it. Don't analyze or judge where the mind has gone. Just simply and gently just draw it back with a gentle hand of love. Just draw the mind back to the breath. And now as you are merged into awareness with the breath, allow that awareness to drop into the energy center, the chakra, just below your belly button, what's called the Swadhisthana chakra. And it's just about 2 inches below the navel. Allow the breath to be taken from there. So as you inhale, feel that energy center, that Swadhisthana chakra. Feel the energy center filling and opening. You can think of it like a lotus flower. And as you inhale, the petals of the lotus are opening and opening. More and more energy is being drawn in to that energy center. As you breathe in, feel the Swadhisthana chakra fill with sacred life force, sacred prana. And as you exhale, allow yourself to drop deeply into that core of the self. In Sanskrit, Swadhisthana literally means the place of the self. So take the inhalations and exhalations from there, allowing the awareness, the focus, the attention to merge fully into the breath. So the petals of that lotus flower open on the inhalations. And as you sink deeper and deeper on the exhalations, whenever the mind wanders, just bring it back. Gentle and loving hand, like a mother guiding a little toddler who's crawling astray. Just gently and lovingly bring that mind back to the breath. You can add a very gentle mantra with this. You can add the mantra of Soham, chanting So on the inhalations and Hum on the exhalations silently to yourself, to continually remind yourself, I am that. on the next inhalation, rather than letting the breath expand out into the abdomen, allow it to rise. So as you inhale, just gently and lovingly, again, we're not doing pranayama, but just gently allow that breath to rise upward. So you inhale from the Swadhisthana chakra, below the navel. And then slowly that breath just rises upward. You're carrying it only through your intention. And it rises up through the solar plexus, through the rib cage and lungs, through the throat, and ultimately up to the third eye center, the Agya chakra, just between the eyebrows. And then we drop back down to the Swadhisthana chakra. And if you can't allow the breath to rise in one unbroken, smooth inhalation all the way up to the Agya chakra, don't worry. Just take it as high as it goes, gently. And then release. But keeping the awareness, the intention, on bringing it up to the third eye center. So the breath is rising from the Swadhisthana chakra, from that seat of the self, gently and smoothly on the inhalations, it's rising upward. And the mind's eye is always on that third eye center, drawing lovingly the breath upwards and allowing that third eye center to open. Not with force, not with effort, just with presence and love and attention. Allow that breath to rise higher and higher on each inhalation. And allow yourself to sink deeper and deeper into that core of yourself on each exhalation. And remember, if the mind wanders, just bring it back to the breath, and back to the mantra of Soham. Slowly and gently, bring the palms of the hands together at chest level and rub them gently against each other. Place the cupped palms of your hands over your closed eyes. Slowly open the eyes and lower the hands. The mind. The mind and its distractions. Whenever we sit to meditate, we always know the mind wanders. But hopefully you were able to experience how, with intention and attention, you can just bring it back. Just bring it back. And hopefully you noticed, even in this short meditation, that you get a little better at it. Even just over one meditation practice, you just get a little better at bringing the mind back. Bringing it back. And this is how it works with our mind, even when our eyes are open and we're moving through the world, not only in our meditative practices. It's so easy to think that the reason we're so distracted, the reason our minds are not in our control is we've got so much to do, there's so much going on, we've got never-ending to-do lists. Then, of course, we've got our devices that don't give us, even 2 minutes of quiet. But go back 5,000 plus years, back to the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and Arjuna says to Bhagavan Krishna, the mind is so difficult to control, it's turbulent, it's restless. It's out of control. I think trying to control the mind is harder even than trying to control the wind. This was long before phones were ringing, long before there were reminders and notifications and to-do lists. It's a product of the mind. And I think that's really important because I don't know about you all, but I know for myself, and I suspect it's true for others, that there's a sense of feeling like you're somehow a failure, that you should be able to control the mind, and that somehow we are failing at this task that really ought to be quite simple. So we sit to meditate, the mind wanders, or we make a commitment that we're not going to let the mind wander, it wanders. And then we feel like a bit of a failure, a bit weak, a bit less than what we would like to be, because it seems like, my God, I can't even get a hold of my own mind. And it's really helpful to go back and to realize, oh wow, all right, this is the stuff our scriptures are made of. This is not my personal failing. This is the nature of the mind. A river's nature is to flow in a certain direction. The nature of the mind is to flow in every direction simultaneously, all the time. It's why Bhagavan Krishna was already speaking about this monkey mind at that time. So don't feel badly, but also recognize that just like any skill that we want to learn, it takes practice. You know, you would never expect that you could get up today and I could stick you in front of a piano and you'd be able to play Beethoven. I mean, you'd understand, well, first I have to learn how to play, then I have to practice and practice and practice and practice and practice. We understand that whatever it is we want to be able to do with any part of this physical body, our hands, our legs, our mouth, our tongue, singers, whatever we may do, we have to keep practicing. And if we don't practice, we won't be able to do it. And the brain, the very physical brain, the medium through which we experience mind, is also just a part of this being that either can be trained and become a good tool in our hands, like our arms and our legs and our tongues, or it can just run rampant. But it's up to us. But it takes practice. And this is where Krishna emphasizes two aspects: abhyas, practice, and vairagya, non-attachment. Abhyas is obvious, practice. We just have to keep practicing. We practice in meditation, and we practice as we move through the world. We've spoken over the last couple of days about ways of working with the mind. So the mind is veering off into negativity, into judgment, into my story, and I just bring it back. Just the same way I do like in my meditation. The guy cuts me off on the freeway. I'm just about to yell, either outside or in my own mind. Idiot, who does he think he is? And I just catch it. And I just bring it back. Whether through telling a story of compassion, or whether just through re-anchoring in the fact that I'm not the driver of that other car. I'm not the physical body. So however we work with it, we just bring the mind back. Bring it back, either with the creative writing stories, our practice of our affirmations, our soham mantra. But we're working with it. That's the abhyas. And the Vairagya is something really interesting because with regard to the mind, it's really a matter, it's not about being disconnected. A lot of times people define Vairagya as disconnected. And this idea, I've lived in India almost 26 years now, and I've heard people all the time say things like, oh, I've really mastered this Vairagya. I've become very aloof. Nothing touches me. I'm completely disconnected. This is going on with my kids or grandkids or brothers or sisters or neighbors, and I don't care. I don't care. I'm very, very good and disconnected. That's not actually what Vairagya means. Aloofness or indifference are not synonyms for Vairagya. These are not virtues that we are actually supposed to attain. We've been given hearts that love, that feel compassion, minds that have initiative and creativity to serve, to help. Not in such a way that the ultimate goal is to be disconnected from the world around us. And if you doubt that, just look at our enlightened masters. Look at how Puja Swamiji moves through the world. Deeply connected, but not stuck. Not stuck, not trapped, but connected in love. So Vairagya, in the beginning when I first got to India and learned about it, I always thought it doesn't really make sense, because as I watched Puja Swamiji, as I watched other really divine saints, they were the ones who were always so deeply caring and compassionate and connected. They were the opposite of aloof and indifferent and disconnected. And those who felt very proud that they had mastered aloofness and indifference and disconnection were not people that I would look at and say, oh, this looks like an enlightened being, or oh, this looks like an awakened soul, or this looks like someone to become. They looked like cranky, grumpy, self-centered, really disconnected beings, not beings of light or love or divinity. And it troubled me a little bit in my mind, and I just allowed it to be there. And a few years later, I was sitting actually in Katha with Puja Vaishri, and he was speaking about bhakti, devotion. But as most of you know, bhakti is not only the virtue of devotion, but she's actually a being. Like there was a being named Bhakti. And she's got a story. And she takes birth and she grows. And Bhakti has children. And Bhakti's children are Gyan and Vairagya. And suddenly, as I heard this, I thought, oh, and it all made sense. Because Vairagya had always seemed to me very dry disconnection. That it was somehow this idea of taking your juicy heart, squeezing it dry, and then somehow you would have attained Vairagya. But Bhakti is juicy. Bhakti is not dry, sort of general, love for all in a very dry, kind of theoretical sort of way. Bhakti is juicy love. Bhakti is the stuff that makes you sing and dance and cry Forget to eat, forget to sleep, forget to do everything because you are so in love. And of course, juicy love cannot give birth to dry disconnection. And I remember sitting there thinking, are we sure Vairagya was not adopted? Right? I mean, otherwise, how does it make sense? And I realized, okay, this is actually a mistranslation. That it's not detachment or disconnection, but it's reattachment, meaning normally most of us we're stuck. And this is what happens in our minds. We're constantly thinking about the things we are attached to. Who's saying what to whom? What's happening in the stock market? Are people liking us? Are they respecting us? Do we look good? Are people looking at us and thinking we look good? Are we, moving through our social sphere in a positive way? Is the project, the job that we're doing, is it going to succeed? Are we going to have financial security? All of the things that we're thinking about, things we've got to get done. It's all about our attachment to the very minute things of the world. Physical body, physical story, drama, attachments, roles, relationships. Oh my God, did my kid go to school without their lunchbox? Oh my God. Nothing wrong with it. It's very sweet. But it's attachment, and it keeps the mind stuck. When we reattach our minds to bhakti, to love of God, automatically from mother to offspring we get vairagya. That detachment from the things that make us stuck in the world comes because we have reconnected to something much deeper, much higher, much fuller. And for me, the way that I like to think about it is if you were walking down a beach and you collect seashells or rocks, because they're beautiful and they're shiny and they're nice, and your hands are full of them. And then at the end of the beach, there's someone with a bucket full of diamonds. And they're literally standing there, with the bucket, and they're pouring the bucket out. Now, your hands are full. What are you going to do? Right? Most of us are going to immediately drop all of the seashells, all of the rocks, not because we had to go through a course in learning to become detached, not because we were chanting mantras of vairagya, but because we just intuitively, immediately, instinctively understood what I am being offered is of much more value than that which I am already holding on to. And if I don't let go of what I'm holding on to, there is no room to accept that which is being offered. And so when we attach ourselves to bhakti, to love, to devotion, if we're full and stuck with our minds on little things, distinctions and jealousies and anger and grudges and expectations and attachments and nonsense. Well, there isn't room for the juice of devotion to flow. And because we automatically understand, we feel intuitively how much more valuable that love of God is, it automatically causes us to let go of the rest. So that's the vairagya, is we allow ourselves to let go of the stuff that keeps the mind working in overdrive. Oh my God, what if there's traffic on the way home that I'm not going to be able to get to the supermarket on time, then I'm not going to be able to get the cereal that I need for tomorrow morning, and if I don't have the cereal, then I won't properly get my fiber in the morning, and then my stomach's going to be bad all day long, and then in the night, here you are, some beautiful place. Where does the mind go, right? We're not even able to be where we are because we're already on the way home and with our not clean stomach the day after tomorrow, right? That's the nature of the mind. So abhyas and vairagya. But I want also for a moment to speak about not only that which has plagued us for thousands and thousands and thousands of years since we have had brains as we do, since we have had the very complex cerebral cortex that distinguishes us from our earlier ancestors. But I want to talk about that which is happening in today's world. Because something very, very tragic is happening to our minds aside from just the nature of the mind. And that is fortunately something over which we do have some control. And that has to do with general distraction. So we've got root monkey mind that we were already getting teachings on in the Bhagavad Gita that's plagued humankind for thousands of years. But then we've got present day distractions from our devices, from the way that the world has started working, the speed at which it's going. And we've gotten to a point, I read a really, really interesting study. Most of you know I love science and I love studies, and I read a really interesting study recently that the average worker in the average American workplace goes how long, I want you to guess, how long on average without being interrupted? Guess how long the average worker works on any given task in an average day, average workplace before they are interrupted by a phone call, an incoming email, somebody talking to them over the cubicle, whatever it may be. How long do you think we get on average?
10 seconds.
Somewhere between the 10 seconds and 5 minutes. 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Now, that's statistic 1. Statistic 2 is even scarier. And this is good science, by the way. Like, this has been done by top institutions. I can get you the details if you're interested. But study 2 says, over the course of an hour, if you are interrupted every 3 minutes, like the average worker is, during that 1 hour, your IQ drops 10 points. You are 10 IQ points stupider after an hour of work than you are before. However, there's another part of that. If you did no work and you simply sat at your desk and you smoked marijuana, your IQ would be 5 points less than it was at the beginning of the hour. Meaning, getting interrupted every 3 minutes makes us twice as stupid as if we simply sat at our desks, did nothing, and got high. we have created a situation where we are getting stupider. I mean, has anybody else noticed a diminishing ability to concentrate? A diminishing ability to engage in long, thoughtful conversations. I noticed it was interesting last year when my memoir, Hollywood to the Himalayas, came out. I had so many people say to me at the beginning, when is the audio version coming out? I just can't read books anymore. And I noticed it, and I thought, that's so interesting. And yeah, of course, the publishers did an audio version, and it was fine, but it stayed in my mind as just, that's really interesting. And then when I read this study, it all started to make sense. We are, as a people, less able to concentrate than we were 10, 20, 30 years ago. So if you notice that in yourself, you are not alone. This is what is happening to us. And it is happening to us because our brains adapt and change based on how we live. And getting constantly interrupted, constantly distracted, actually changes our brain and diminishes its capacity to not be interrupted. Because then what you notice that's interesting is, at work maybe, you're getting interrupted by other people, by phone calls, by other things that you have to attend to. But then what's interesting is you leave work, you go home, you sit down to have a conversation with the family, and after 3 minutes, what do? You pick up your phone to see if you've gotten any WhatsApp messages. The mind has gotten programmed and adapted to that every 3 minutes something should happen. And so when it's not automatically happening from outside, we start creating it because the brain has gotten adapted to it. And this is killing us. Because everything in life that is valuable, from our meditation practices, to prayer, to deep conversations, to reading scriptures, reading inspiring things, to being in nature, to being in satsang, to sitting in katha, it requires us to be able to focus for an extended period of time. And we are changing our brains to not be able to do that. And the other tragic piece that happens is, it's very stressful. When the brain constantly is ready to be interrupted, it's always in this heightened state of hyper-alertness. We've got skyrocketing rates of ADD and ADHD being diagnosed in our kids. And I won't go too much into that. But there's a reason for this, which is that brains at young ages, yes, there's some genetic components, but there's a huge, huge, huge environmental component. And it's that brains from a young age are not being allowed to focus without being interrupted. As parents, and I mention this because a lot of you have kids, a lot of you are going to be having kids, one of the things that parents have started doing more and more is a kid will be playing with something. And the parent will interrupt that kid and try to get them to play with something else. Now they do it well-intentioned. Oh, sweetie, look at this. Look, I brought you this. You give a kid a gift, a child, a young child, And the child is ecstatically playing with the bow, the box, and we are constantly like, no, open it, open it, open it, look, 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 look. Or the kid is playing with a toy and we come over with something new, something else. We are actually changing the brain of that child to be programmed to constantly need something new, something different every few minutes. Children need to be left alone, not ignored, not abandoned, but to be allowed to actually have the time and the space to just drop into whatever it is they are playing in, exploring, learning about. But it's not only kids, it's us. And so before we go into the questions, I want to just give a few so what to do answers. Because obviously we can't rewind history, we can't uninvent smartphones, we can't uninvent email, we can't do that. But we can decide how we're going to let it run our lives. And so, for example, one of the very first things I recommend doing, turn off all your notifications, other than the ringing of a phone. If it's urgent, they will call you. If you send someone a message about something that's urgent and they don't get back to you, what do? You call them. So you can all rest assured that if anything is ever urgent or an emergency, the person who has messaged you will call you. Turn off all notifications. You then have the ability, at your own time, at your own schedule, to pick up your phone and to check your messages and to respond to them. On your schedule, not the schedule of every 30 seconds something is beeping or ringing or binging. And if for whatever reason you think that's too difficult, then at least begin by turning off all social media notifications. There is nothing urgent coming to you from Facebook, I guarantee it. Nothing urgent coming to you from Instagram, from any direct message, I guarantee you. They're never about urgent things. So begin at least with turning off all social media notifications and turn off all group notifications. Begin at least there, right? You get in a group and suddenly every half a second somebody or other in the group is posting. Turn off all the notifications. Every few hours, or once a day, or once every 2 days, depending on which group it is, how important it is, you can open it up. I guarantee you, you won't have missed anything that's an emergency. Begin there and then slowly just turn off all your notifications. It's a great place to begin. There are programs on your computer, if you're someone who works on the computer. There's a program called Freedom. It turns off the internet. So if you've got something you need to do, you've got to do some writing, you've got to work on a project, you're doing something that requires time, attention, focus, creativity. You just, and it's tragic, of course, because theoretically we would be able to say, well, I'm just not going to go on the internet for the next few hours, but we all know how successful that is. So it's a program, it's free. It's called Freedom. I'm sure there are others, but that's the one that I use. And it just literally, it shuts off your internet for however long you want it. You program it, 2 hours, 3 hours. Gmail, you can pause your inbox. I do that whenever I write. So even if I go into my inbox, there's no new email, it's been paused. And you set it for a certain number of hours. And they seem like small things, but you'll notice the huge difference in your mind. Have certain times of the day that are no device times. Make a decision. How long after you wake up in the morning can you go before checking your phone? And if for any reason something urgent happens every morning, can you set it up to happen in a different way? So that you can have at least a few hours in the morning without your device. Give yourself those morning hours to just, or if you get your daily motivation on your phone, okay, you get that, but nothing else. There's no right or wrong way, but it's all about taking back control and realizing that we are not slaves, and that just because it bings or rings or flashes does not mean I have to attend to it. It is not a crying child. It's a device. But we respond to it like it's our child screaming in the next room. Take back that control. And especially with youth. And it's hard. I mean, parents always ask me, what do I do? Well, you set rules. Are your kids going to hate you? Of course. But kids have always hated their parents. I mean, they don't really hate you, but they're going to say they hate you. But this is not new. Kids have been telling their parents, I hate you, ever since curfews were invented. Ever since any rule was ever invented, ever since bedtime was invented. Kids have screamed at their parents, no, it's not fair. So-and-so gets to stay up till midnight. So-and-so doesn't have to come home on time. So-and-so can do this. It's part of the package deal of being a parent. The device is just the thing today. When I was growing up, it was curfews. Yeah. It was being allowed to drive. Right? I remember when I got my license, I was not allowed to drive on the freeway. And I was furious. Everybody else could drive on the freeway. Why was I not allowed to drive on the freeway? And I had these really early curfews. Had to come home really early. And I was furious. I hate you. Okay. But as a parent, recognize, you've got to be strong in yourself to know, of course they don't hate you. You are laying the rules, the boundaries, the system, that even though their child self or teenage self wants something different in the moment, you're giving them something ultimately that's so much better. If your child screams, I don't want to eat vegetables and dal, I only want to eat licorice, are you going to let them? You say no more licorice and they say I hate you, and you're going to say, oh, okay. Fine, forget it, no problem, don't eat dinner, eat licorice? Of course not. They're going to say, fine, hate me, I don't care, but eat your vegetables. You can hate me while you eat your vegetables, but no licorice. In the same way, as parents, we have to be strong. Grounded enough in ourselves that we are not thrown around emotionally by our child wanting to do something that we don't want them to do. So set boundaries. And of course, it's not don't let them have phones. It's make sure that there are hours in the day, places, their bedroom, their homework time, meal times, no phone times. Just set it up. It's really not rocket science. It's the same thing. Let's say that your doctor told you you were diabetic, or you were overweight, you need to lose weight, you need to lower your sugar. Well, there's all sorts of things you're going to have to do if you want to stay healthy and stay alive. So you make changes. Because you realize it's worth it. Yes, I love ladus, but I like staying alive more. So okay, I'm prepared to let go of the ladus so I can stay alive. In the same way, it's just about setting up boundaries and systems. Otherwise, we lose the most powerful thing in our lives, which is our minds. We lose the ability to focus, to concentrate, to pay attention. And all of spiritual life and all of a successful life in general is rooted in the ability to focus and concentrate and pay attention. I guarantee you no one on their deathbed said, I wish I had spent more time scrolling on social media. Oh my God, I don't want to die. What's going to happen on Facebook tomorrow, right? Can't die until I see all the YouTube recommendations. Nobody says that. We've become pawns in the hands of business. And that's all it is. And they've grabbed this thing of our mind that in any case jumps around. And they've spent God knows how many billions of dollars to study it and understand it and plot against it in order to grab our steering wheel of our lives out of our hands, to distract us, to make us click here and buy, to make us angry, to make us feel like we're not enough. And we have just handed over our minds and our time. So, on the one hand, don't feel guilty. The monkey mind is a product of the mind. But on the other hand, recognize that there is a lot you can do and a lot that you should be doing. Because a lot of it is still in our hands. And it's really our responsibility to get back our minds, because all of that which we are required to do in the world today, whether it's peace, whether it's environmental protection, whether it's ending climate change, whether it's feeding the hungry, whatever we are called upon to do in the world, however we are called upon to show up in the world, it requires us to be able to pay attention. And if we can't pay attention, we can't show up. So let us grab back our minds. That part of it is really, really in our hands. And your meditation practice will be the greatest foundation. And then the mantra, right? That Soham mantra, or your Guru mantra if you have one. Just bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. And for God's sakes, get your notifications off. Give yourself hours a day, no phones, and you'll see how the mind actually starts to settle back in to itself. Will you hand me the basket of our questions? Thank you. How do you strike a balance between being friendly, empathetic, and caring, but not being taken advantage of by others? It's the difference between my heart and my time. Caring, empathy, love, compassion, These are qualities of the heart. How I spend my time, my precious few hours of the day, is a choice I need to make. And what you'll find is, if you really are striving to be caring and compassionate and empathetic, well, you can't actually do everything. I mean, where do you even begin? Children are dying of starvation. Our water is disappearing. Climate change is getting worse and worse every day. There's wars, there's violence. Where do you even begin? And there's no right answer, except to be aware that we obviously have to make choices. We cannot simultaneously do everything for everyone. And in the effort to do so, we end up not being able to do anything really effectively for anyone. And so simply because I am compassionate and caring doesn't necessarily mean that I'm supposed to do something in that moment. And I'll give you a personal example. When I first got to India and we were driving through Delhi, you know, people come up to the windows of the car asking for money, typically they're kids. And my instinct, of course, was to roll down the window and to give out money. And it was explained to me really clearly that that was a very bad decision. A, it's all these mafia who are sending the kids out to raise the money. But B, that I was actually putting these kids' lives at risk because they always do it at red lights. And the minute you hand 10 rupees to some kid, 100 of them suddenly rush in out of nowhere, just as the light is about to change. And then these kids end up getting hit by cars. And so I stopped giving money out of car windows, but it felt deeply important to me to not allow the empathy and the caring to go. And so what I do now, and this is just a personal decision, how I've dealt with it, is I still roll down the window and I look at the person, or if it's not a tinted window, then I just look through it. And I make eye contact with them and I smile. And I make sure that they know that I have seen them. That just because I'm not going to give them money doesn't mean that I'm negating their presence as a human being on earth. And I make sure that my heart sees them and sees the tragedy of the situation that we are afflicted by on planet Earth today. And it's hard. It's really hard to stare into someone's eyes who needs money. Just because they've been co-opted by the mafia doesn't mean that they're not in horrible situations. To look into someone's eyes and not give. But I think it's important because I think the answer is not cutting ourselves off, but it's about making wise, conscious decisions about what to do for whom and when. And of course, people will try to manipulate you. They'll say things like, well, if you were nice, you would do this for me. God, I always thought you were a compassionate person. How could you not do this for me? So people will always try to manipulate you. But this is where you need to use that power of discrimination. I can love you and care about you and understand the predicament you are in while simultaneously recognizing that it really is not in the best interest of the whole karmic package unfolding for me to step in and do whatever it is that you're asking. Remember also that when we talk about being caring and compassionate, well, we have to be caring and compassionate to ourselves as well. We are not separate from the world. And there has to be an element of self-compassion and self-care that says, for me, here is what I need. And not to lose that in trying to be everything to everyone. So that's a balance that you will have to strike, but it doesn't mean that you don't be compassionate and empathetic. It just means that you recognize the finiteness of your time, your energy, your resources, and you use your buddhi, your intelligence, your clarity, to figure out what is the best and most appropriate use of my time, of my energy, of my resources, to be of the most service. And it's not, surprisingly, always doing what everybody wants you to do. Learning how to say no is actually a bit of a spiritual practice. And it doesn't mean that you're selfish, it doesn't mean that you're rude. It means that you're clear. And that you're actually anchored and grounded enough in yourself that even if that person is upset with you, you don't lose yourself. Otherwise, what most of us do is we literally lose our lives out of fear that Samnewali will not like us, or will think that we are selfish, or will think that we are not nice. And so really being able to say no, not out of selfishness, but out of clarity and compassion for yourself, for others who may also need your time and energy and resources, is really important. And if someone really loves you, they're going to respect that. How to compare Mahabharata War with World War I and II with Russia and Ukraine. And is there any chance of World War III? So, war in general is all about power. Power, land, money, resources. That's all it is. Even the so-called religious wars are not about religion. They're not about religion. If every Hindu moved out of Kashmir and handed it over to Pakistan, there'd be no more fighting. If India just handed it over, okay, there'd be no more fighting. If the Jews left Israel and every one of them moved to, Norway, well, the Arabs wouldn't chase them to Norway to fight over how they're worshipping. The Pakistanis wouldn't come into other parts of India to try to change how the Hindus are worshipping. Nobody really cares how anybody else worships, and this is true vice versa. Right? I mean, India, the Hindus of India are not going to go into Pakistan and fight how they're worshipping. The Jews aren't going to chase the Arabs. If they left Israel, they're not going to chase them into Jordan and fight over how they're worshipping. Nobody really cares how other people worship. What they care about is land and money and power. So war in general is all about that. What happens is we co-opt people into fighting wars by giving them grand notions. So if it's religious wars, we tell them, God will be happy with you. You will have this in the afterlife, or you will attain heaven. You will have this and that if you fight this war. Because if I say to somebody, I really would like to be more powerful. I'd really like to have more land and money. Would you mind, going out and possibly losing your life so I could have more power? That would be a hard sell. But if I say those people are against God, and God wants you to go and to fight for God, well, it's a lot easier. And there are wars that sometimes can't be avoided. I mean, whether you look at the Mahabharata, with what Duryodhana was doing, we've spoken about this already. Krishna had tried to get him to be reasonable, he wouldn't. Dharma had to be restored, otherwise they were going to rule the kingdom with adharma. And adharma would spread across the land. Or you look at what Hitler was doing back in World War II. It had to be stopped. So there are times that wars are fought because there are people or things that need to be stopped for the greater good. But the overwhelming, vast majority of cases, you look at Ukraine and Russia right now, well, it's just all about Putin having more land, more power. I'm not enough, I need more. And that's what most of them are rooted in. And this is why we need a spiritual revolution. So that we all actually know how full we are and complete we are, whole we are. That we don't actually need to grab neighboring lands. More power in order to feel full. I don't need water, I'm good. I'm okay. Thank you. Yeah, we'll come to you in just a moment. How to stay patient when life is throwing challenges and obstacles at you. Well, what's your option? What's the alternative to staying patient, right? Life is throwing challenges and obstacles at you. What are your choices? You stay patient or you become miserable, right? Is there a third option? Is your lack of patience somehow going to convince the universe to stop throwing challenges? As though somehow the universe is going to go, oh, you didn't like that, okay. Sorry. That which is coming toward us is that which is part of our karmic package to have come into our life. And I don't mean that in a way that we should all just be resigned, because a lot of times it comes into our life for us to look at it, address it, change it. Just because it's part of our karmic package doesn't mean that we resign ourselves to it. But it means that it is there for a reason. Maybe because we've planted a seed of it, literally. Maybe it's part of a collective karma of a particular community, a particular family, a particular country, a particular race, a particular whatever it might be. Or maybe it's there because the presence of that obstacle and challenge is exactly what we need in order to peel back layers of ourself to get closer to God. But it's there for a reason. And not being patient just prevents you from being able to learn whatever the lesson is. Patience is not resignation. Patience doesn't mean, okay, I'll just sit here and do nothing and allow all of these struggles to come. It means I see them with clarity. I always say what we need our 3 C's. Connection. We need to be connected to the divine in us, in the world, to recognize that we are anchored and grounded in divinity, to be channels of that flow of the divine. And then out of that connection comes courage. Courage to do whatever it is that the situation is calling upon us to do. And then out of that courage comes creativity. To think, all right, well, what is the new way to address this, to deal with this, to change this, or just to accept this? But they all require patience, because patience is a calm and still mind. If my mind is all over the place, I'm not going to be able to be connected and then have that ability to respond to the moment with what it requires. And it just makes us more and more stressed. Pujya Swamiji always says, you've only got 2 choices. Either you have patience, or you become a patient. So be patient or become a patient. It's the only options. Yes. How are we on time, by the way?
Just a question that,
It's 12:30. We are just over time. Okay, we'll go another 5 minutes and then we'll end. Yeah.
I will not take long time, but in the time of the Lord Krishna, another thing, the World War, the Mahabharata that happened, it also happened World War I and World War II. And then now the Ukraine and Russia. So where is Lord that it is not going to let it happen? Just a question. I can do a lot more, but that's...
The only way to prevent war is for us to wake up. That was what I was saying before, is that they all stem from ignorance, from greed, from a sense of not enoughness, so I need more. They stem from a sense of separation, othering, they are us, we are us, they are them, we are different, they are for, they are the enemy. The only way to prevent war is for every one of us to have our own spiritual revolution. There is no law you can put into place, sadly, that would prevent war. I would love it, but we can't. The only thing that can happen is that each of us takes our spiritual practice seriously. We become as free as we can of our greed, of our sense of separation from others. We become as aware of our own fullness and perfection as we can. And then we share that with others. And wherever we see division and greed and othering, we do whatever we can to help share peace. It's all we can do. When we have that inside, it's what we bring to the world. So it has to be from within. And then each of us can be agents of that in the world.
I think ego plays a big role.
The ego plays the full role. The greed, the othering, it's all about ego. It is the ego saying, I am this. right? So I am this race, this religion, this color, this nationality, therefore all of the others are other. And we draw these lines between us. The ego says, I deserve more. I deserve your land. I deserve that. I mean, could you imagine taking over the yard of the guy next to you? Right? I mean, just think about it on a little level. That just suddenly, you wake up one day and you look out your window and you think, that should be mine. I mean, what kind of person would be required to do that? And then when the neighbor says, hey, bye, get off my land, you kill him. Not because you necessarily hate him as a being, but because he is standing between you and what you think should be yours. You should have that. It's all ego. It's all ignorance. Yeah. So we'll take one more and then bring this to a conclusion. How can I adopt the vegan diet, especially when the Indian diet is centered around sweets, milk, paneer, fried snacks, etc.? A wonderful place to end, a place very dear to my heart. So let's go back to my example about being diabetic for a moment. Let's say that you go to the doctor and they say, oh my God, your sugar is whatever it is. And if you don't control it, you will very likely not live another year. Well, you may still really love laddus and gulab jamun and pakoras and whatnot, but you understand that you love life more. And even though the mind may keep going, most of us will have the willpower to not eat it. Because we understand life is more precious. So even if my diet had always been puris and pakoras and sweets, well, I need to now learn to live a different diet. Now, a vegan diet, of course, we're all vegetarian. A vegan diet, and in India, vegetarian anyway usually means we don't eat eggs anyway. So it's really only about the dairy aspect. But I'll speak about eggs for just a moment, because I know sometimes in the Indian communities abroad we do start to eat eggs. So I'll just quickly go into eggs and then milk. So the way that eggs work, if you've never actually seen it with your own eyes, is the hen lays the egg, it comes out of her, it is her actual menstrual cycle, like women of all species make eggs. The male, the rooster, then sits on the egg, which is very, very soft when it comes out of her. And in some way, he injects his sperm into that soft egg, and it gets fertilized. And then they sit on it, and eventually a baby chick comes out. There's a museum in Los Angeles called the Museum of Science and Industry. And it's a fascinating museum. I love it. And they've got an exhibit there where there's an incubator, and it's full of a bunch of little eggs, and it's glass so you can look in. There's a bunch of little eggs. And it's, a museum for kids. And so they put the eggs in there that are just about to hatch. And if you stand there for 10 minutes, you'll start to see at least one of the eggs will start to rock back and forth, and there'll come a little crack in the egg. And then in a few minutes, you'll see this little wet little chick face, and it squeezes its face through the egg, and eventually it comes out and it's all wet and cute and comes out and shakes itself. And if you keep watching, within half an hour, you can actually watch a little chick be born. And once it does this, and the feathers dry, and then it becomes that cute little fluffy chick. And of course, it begs the question, well, before the egg started to rock back and forth, was that vegetarian? I mean, clearly once the chick comes out, it's not vegetarian anymore. But before the chick came out, when it was still in the egg, is it vegetarian? What about yesterday? I mean, can something be vegetarian today and the same thing not be vegetarian tomorrow? Or vice versa? Something's either life or it's not. Next to the incubator, they've got something that it's a big microscope and a big microscope slide. And on the slides, if you look without the microscope, just to the naked eye, it looks like tiny, tiny little squiggly pieces of mucus. And if you've ever cracked an egg open, what you know is that in the yellow, when you crack open an egg, there's a tiny, tiny, tiny little itsy bitsy squiggly thing that's usually stuck to the yolk in some way. And that's what this is on the slides. And with their high-powered microscope, you look at it, you realize that's the fetus. That is the fetus of the chick, and it's actually a spinal cord. And what they've got on the slide is the whole gestation period, which I don't remember how long it is, but let's just call it a week for the sake of argument. And so it's like, 21 days, okay. So say it's day 5, then say it's day 10, then say it's day 15. And what you see, to the naked eye, it still keeps looking like just a little squiggly thing. But under the microscope, you start to really see the full-on skull and spinal cord, and you really start to see this baby develop. Now, clearly, that's not vegetarian. The white and the yellow of the egg are there to become the nourishment of the body of the chick. That's why it's there. That's why they're so high in protein. It's why they're so full of nutrients, is it turns this tiny little itsy bitsy thing into a chick. So clearly that is not vegetarian food. The other main issue though with it is the way that they are raised. The violence in the egg industry to the egg-laying hens is so bad that if you actually witnessed it, you would never eat another egg again. What these hens are put through. The question then arises, well, what about unfertilized eggs? Because in this country, you can get unfertilized eggs, meaning there is no rooster. And I've had people ask me, well, okay, it's a farm, it's vegetarian, they're being fed vegetarian feed, and the hens are roaming around free range outside, they're not being tortured or anything like that. Is that okay to eat? There's no life, it's just the egg from the hen. She lives a nice life. Is that okay to eat? And to me, on a moral level, I don't have a lot of moral problems with that. If you've got hens and you never turn your hens into chickens and they live as nice members of the family and they roam around in the garden living a happy life, and periodically the hen gives you an egg and you decide to eat it, I'm not horribly morally opposed to that. But what you have to really ask yourself is, how badly do you want to eat the menstrual cycle of another species? I mean, because that's really what it is. Our eggs stay in the fallopian tubes. They eventually then If it's fertilized, it'll go in the uterus. If not, it comes out as our menstrual cycle. How is it possible that God has created a creation in which, in order to get the nourishment it needs, one species is supposed to eat the menstrual cycle of another species? See, that just doesn't make any sense to me. I just don't believe that we are created to eat other species' menstrual cycles. But if for you that's an okay, good thing to do, and it's not harming anybody, and the hens are, again, as I said, raised in a happy, nice way as members of the family, never killed, and the eggs are not fertilized, and you want to eat them. I think on the moral level, you haven't actually killed anything, you haven't harmed anything. I think it's gross. But the vast majority of eggs are fertilized eggs. And the vast majority of eggs come from hens who are factory farmed, which are violence, absolute violence. And anyone committed on any level to ahimsa could not possibly support that industry. And that brings us into the milk. I drink milk on our ashram in India. We have cows, they live very well. Nobody ever kills them or harms them. When they stop giving milk, they're kept. It's like a cow old age home. When they give birth, the babies drink it first. The babies live with their mothers. Whatever is left over is what we take. Nobody's artificially inseminated. Nobody's given hormones or antibiotics. The cows roam around together. The feed that they eat is all organic. Everybody does go puja, you know, they get all of the jaggery and mangoes and yummies all day long because people are going and doing their puja. So I take the milk. But other than somebody who has a cow at their home, or the ahimsa milk that the Hare Krishna community does at some of their temples, some parts of the world, there's no other milk that I know of that is produced without great violence. It is a product of violence. The cows are being artificially inseminated. And I don't mean in a nice, gentle way. I mean in a violent, horrible, vulgar way that I have heard referred to as rape. And it really looks like it. If you actually see what is done to these cows, how they are impregnated, they are kept chained up when they give birth, because remember, the reason that they give milk is the same reason that human women give milk, for their babies. So they're pregnant, they give birth. Well, milk is money in a business. So the babies don't drink any milk. The babies are immediately taken away from their mothers at birth. They go off to become typically veal. So if you are a vegetarian but you drink milk, there is a huge inconsistency because the meat industry is incestuously linked to the dairy industry in this country. Those baby cows that are given birth to by the dairy cows become your veal, or they become your beef. The cows are, of course, pumped full of all kinds of, hormones and antibiotics and whatnot. And even if you buy organic milk, I used to think that if it was organic, somehow that meant that they were nice to the cows, but it doesn't. It just means that they don't give the hormones and antibiotics. But the treatment of the cows is the same. The treatment of their babies is the same. So in this country, being vegan is a decision about ahimsa. It's also a health decision. I mean, there's also all kinds of research around the milk from the cows, but that's a different subject. But I would say, lastly, going back to the example I gave at the beginning about being told you were diabetic and realizing that life is more important, well, we need to ask ourselves, okay, yeah, we like to have paneer and milk and all of the things that we make with it, but we are people committed to ahimsa. We are people committed to nonviolence. We say, Go Mata Ki Jai. And by purchasing milk in this country, you are quite literally and very directly supporting an industry that is torturing the mother cow. And so we take a deep breath and we realize, okay, so things need to change. Just like you got a diabetes diagnosis, okay. So I will change, I will learn. I'll learn how to eat without sweets. I'll learn how to eat not fried food. And luckily in this country, there's so many options. I mean, you can get a dozen different types of fake milks that actually work very nicely. You can get all kinds of things. And what you'll find is that when your actions are in alignment with your beliefs and your values, there is a peace that comes to life that is much, much more valuable and pleasurable than that you get from eating things that you think you want. So, with that, we'll end here, and by the time your lunch is over, we should have some clarity. Maybe Rekha, and you can stay in touch with Atulbai about the flight to just confirm exactly what time we think Puja Swamiji will be here. But I think right around 5 o'clock we should just plan to be up in the reception area. And we'll welcome Puja Swamiji, and then when he goes in to freshen up, we'll come back for our sound healing. And then we will have our beautiful arti this evening out on the garden after dinner. Any other logistic, anything? And we'll take the rest of these tomorrow.